the very form of government. That we exalt waving flags as if we're part of something which we are not.
The effects of Lehman and AIG in September still came as a surprise. I mean, this is even after July and Fannie and Freddie.
But as we have shown, on the contrary, there's no surprise whatever in all this. This is merely the inevitable consequence of the underlying obfuscation of the currency. All of these things are to fail. And yet, the failure of these lending agencies is of no real consequence to a conscientious people, because we would realize that our only possibility of resolution lies in rectifying the obfuscation of the currency, which eliminates the very existence of these purported lending agencies, which these entities merely pretend that they borrow our own promissory obligations from the mere publisher of the evidence of our promissory obligations to each other. They're part of the deception. And so their failure, which is inevitable because the deception multiplies artificial indebtedness into terminal indebtedness, is of no consequence to us that they're failing. We should expect this, and in expecting it, we would have eradicated the whole banking system from the central bank outward, because these entities are hardly banks, storehouses of value which protect our tokenizations of our wealth from offense. On the contrary, they're the primary offenders, and not just to some indistinguishable degree. They are the primary offenders who impose, in fact, a terminal system of exploitation upon us, which dispossesses us of all our production in the end. That going to the central bank, which is insulated from our understanding by this further part of the deception, where the peripheral banks purportedly borrow our own promissory obligations from a mere publisher of the evidence of our promissory obligations to each other.
Clearly, there was stuff that, as of September, major stuff that nobody knew about.
The only thing which is clear, on the contrary, is that the only way that these people claim not to know anything about the ramifications of this obfuscation of the currency is they continually ignore those ramifications, that they can make a living off of pretending to oversee a process which precipitates in our inevitable failure.
I think that's fair.
Fair to say that purportedly vigilant regulators knew nothing about what was inevitable and is only evidence of our terminal destruction by a process which they perpetually turn a blind eye to, that they can make a purported living off of our failure.
Bear Stearns was rated AAA like a month before it went bankrupt?
More likely A2.
Indeed. Artificially rated by the very entities which are purportedly looking out for us. These regulatory agencies know nothing as a consequence of this artificial rating, which is all part of the deception in which the foxes are guarding the hen house.
A2?
Yeah.
Okay. A2 is still not bankrupt.
No. It's a high investment grade, solid investment grade rating. Lehman Brothers, A2 within days of failing. AIG, AA within days of being bailed out. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were AAA when they were rescued. Citigroup, Merrill, all of them had investment grade ratings.
All lies then serve to you all day, every day, in regard to a terminal obfuscation which can only impose these terminal conditions upon us.
How can that be?
We should consider this a rhetorical question because the answer is obvious in our understanding of this obfuscation of the currency, which is terminal. How can that be? What's going on is the foxes are guarding the chicken coop. What's going on is the foxes are selling these debts, and so they're artificially deceiving prospective buyers of the obvious fact that these purported securities, these conglomerations of bad debts, which can only be made bad and ever worse by the obfuscation of the currency, these people were trying to sell them. You see? So it's obvious why they were, it was pretended that these things which they wanted, these debts, these vast bad debts, which can only be made worse by this obfuscation of the currency, which compromises our creditworthiness and our ability to sustain servicing this escalation of artificial debts all the further. So it's obvious why someone who would want to sell these bad debts would obscure, purposely deceive the buyer that things weren't awry by a purported credit rating, which of course couldn't have been falsified to any greater degree. So this is a really stupid question to ask when in fact we've been explaining this fact of inevitable failure for decades, and all of these things were even projected 40 years ago from my work, which not only proved that any purported economy subject to interest inevitably terminates itself under terminal sums of insoluble debt, but even modeled this for the Reagan administration, where computer models that I provided the Reagan administration actually calculate the maximum possible lifespan of such a system, and from 1983 and 4 numbers, those models, which you can still download from my pages, which you can still run 1983 and 4 numbers in, de-escalating interest rates as we did, and project that this system would precipitate in its own terminal failure at approximately 2010 AD. So on the contrary from being a good question, it's preposterous that we ourselves participate in the perpetuation of a lack of understanding of these issues when they're really such elementary mathematics in this purposed ruse which has been imposed upon us, which can only result in these consequences.
Well, that's a good question. That's a great question.
At no point did the administration ever go to all the major institutions and say, this is serious. Tell us what your positions are. No bullshit. Where are you?
Mm-hmm.
This, of course, on the contrary, is nothing but a further stupid question from which the answer is understood in our understanding of this obfuscation of the currency. What do you mean the administration came to these institutions and asked where they were? Why would you ever have to ask when 40 years ago, when 100 years ago, we would understand from the very nature of the currency, the first thing we would examine if we were to project the consequences of this purported Federal Reserve System, which is neither federal nor reserve of anything, which never provided a single qualifying argument or principle which would justify its imposition on us, which was imposed upon us even in compulsory violation of political promises that no central bank would be created by the Democrat Party in 1912. Why are we asking the administration, or why would the administration ask why or how or what the condition of these entities would be in when this obfuscation can only degrade or deteriorate the condition of such entities until, of course, not only are they no longer solvent, but that there is no hope even of restoring their ostensible solubility. What we have to understand from this is that the reason that the very government isn't going to these, and particularly the administration, the person at the top who's most important to persisting in these crimes against us, the reason that they're not going to these institutions and saying, "Oh, show us, what your condition is, and how we might hope to improve that at the ostensible benefit of the people who of course were just preserving this crime above by persisting in banking at all." This is a further preposterous thing. I mean, then the administration would be culpable for, they would be accountable for not turning up something in such an investigation. What they're persisting in is this pretension that there's regulatory agencies which somehow serve us, and we all should know better, because there isn't a single principle by which they could possibly serve us by persisting in this imposed obfuscation of our promissory obligations to each other, which is inevitably terminal. You see? No. On the contrary, who's the largest supporter of each of these candidates who ascend to office? It's always the so-called financial community. The candidates which we see paraded in front of us by these entities which can afford far more so than we can to parade them in front of us from both sides of the aisle. In each case, they're here to persist in this crime over us. So, the last thing that they can do or afford to do, because there is no argument which can justify this obfuscation of the currency, this ancient ruse, the last thing they can afford to do is to engage in some ostensibly critical or responsible investigation into the state of affairs which is precipitated by this obfuscation of the currency, because that process inevitably leads, if there's any integrity in it at all, it leads to this obfuscation of the currency as the fault of all this, which of course would precipitate in the end of this crime against us. So they don't do this, and a thing which I have to admit I was